Hey there, it's Zoe. Welcome back to the show. And our theme for this week is courage and the future of empathy. My question for you this week is, do you have the courage to stand up to tyranny? It's a question I seem to be asking myself every week in this current global economic situation. Well, without further ado, let's get into it. On Planet Human this week, I thought I'd do a little reflection on billionaire-owned media and its impact on our search for the truth and accurate reporting. Now, the media itself has long intoned about the challenges of reporting accurately on facts, and it has become factionalized around that. You know, the idea of alternative facts, which emerged as a meme or concept in the first round of Trump 1.0, has really dominated the headlines. But if we look under the surface, what are the systems at play here? And billionaire-owned media is really about advancing political and economic agendas. We've got Bezos, who bought the Washington Post a couple of years ago. We've got Musk and his takeover of Twitter, now X. And we've got Murdoch, who's been a long-standing stay in the conservative media forums for a long time. So where is independent media? What is happening to it? Well, it's much less independent. These larger institutions are definitely spearheading their conversations and their reporting along political and particular economic and ideological lines. What does this mean for us who are not in the media is, where do we find truth? How do we find truth? How do we find non-biased media? Well, there is a kernel of hope amongst all this, because a lot of the independent reporters who are shocked and chagrined at what was happening in their institutions, such as the Washington Post, have jumped ship, left, and set up their own individual reporting empires. They're not even empires. I guess they're little enclaves on platforms like Substack. So independent journalism is still happening out there, and you have to seek it out, and you have to vet them as you listen to them. So I've been on Substack for a while, and I've been reading a lot of the political commentary, and I'm always careful to realize which angle they're coming from. So do they have a progressive agenda? Do they have a conservative agenda? How does that play out in the reporting? Now, some of them don't even pretend to be unbiased. It's kind of like either anti-Trump or pro-Trump, as an example. And some do a lot of diligence about reporting and interrogating the events that are happening and creating great commentary around that. And I think that this is the future of truth-based reporting, is being able to work with independent reporters and support them on these smaller microcosm platforms. Now, not to say that they will always remain independent and they won't be biased. And yet this is our best chance of being able to avoid the industrial sized media packaging that is happening, that is billionaire led. So these small little root rebellions, I think, are really critical for us. And it comes back to the whole idea of, how do we trust? Who do we trust? How do we find out our facts? And I guess the other bigger question, to which I do not have an answer on Planet Human, which is, what is this doing to us? It is fracturing our narratives. We used to have a common narrative channeled through independent media that reported on big events around the world. So we had this kind of common shared experience as people tuned into the news of the world. Because there is so much splintering, so domination from billionaires on one hand, the mainstream media, and then the splintering of independent voices through social media platforms, we're all having very different experiences, which can lead to polarization and echo chambers and no shared reality that we can interrogate together. What could this mean? I'm not sure. And I'm going to continue to question this and find a way through with the people that I work with. I think it will become central to leadership, is, where do we get our information from? How do we craft together a shared reality or a shared experience with each other, with our stakeholders, with our communities, in a way that's meaningful and helps us build a better future together? Those are probably the better questions. I'm sorry, I don't have the answers, but together we might find them. On Planet Zoe, well, I'm pre-recording this because as this episode rolls out, hopefully I'm on week 2 of my grand Australian Alpine walking track adventure, and we are heading into the home straight. It's currently past Easter and heading up to Anzac Day, which is our last holiday in April. And hopefully it's a fabulous experience. I'll be able to report back in one of the episodes coming up in sort of mid-May. So a little bit ahead of time here. But that's what I'm anticipating is happening, crystal balling into my future. The other thing I'm crystal balling is that Kickstarter, the preview page is up and running on the Kickstarter page. So you can go in and have a look at that. You can get signed up to get advance notification as soon as it goes live, because there are very exclusive bonuses. There's only 3 of the pilot workshops of the Power Play game that I'm offering. So if you want to get that at a massively discounted rate, I'm going to build it into the offering at $2.5K for the 3-hour workshop. The commercial rate for that will be $7.5K. So that is, a third of the actual commercial price. And that's as a thank you to my readers who want to take a chance on the content and experiment alongside me and be part of the pilot. So that's all happening on the Kickstarter page. The link is in the show notes. The big picture question I have around what if and how might we is, what if we could eliminate anti-Semitism and racism? How might we do that? So just an easy, simple question for this, short nugget this week. I think we need to look at what drives division. And a couple of things that drive division are fear of the unknown, scarcity of resources, and struggle for power. Those are the 3 of the big dynamics I see around what drives these kinds of divisions. So the antidote is remedying some of that. So share resources and work together to create more abundance is one of the solutions. Now, a precursor to that is trusting the other people you're working with. So we need to sometimes take a leap of faith or reach out and offer an olive branch towards that. The second one is being curious about novelty. So instead of being scared of something that is different, lean into that and be curious about it. Be curious about other humans, how they think, how they behave, how they eat, how they run their lives, and just be curious and open to learning a new way of living and being in the world that our fellow humans can offer us. And the third thing is contain and constrain power. In the research I did for my book, Power Games, to be released on Kickstarter on May 19th, power, like fire, can be harnessed. So we can use fire to cook food and to warm us, but if it is left unfettered, it can be incredibly destructive, and power is the same way. So we need to be deliberate and intentional about how we use power together, how we share power, and how we allow power to manifest in our businesses and our communities and our institutions, because left unconstrained, it can burn the house down. Oh, yes. Tea time in the office kitchen. And my guest today is Dr. Robert Wolfe. What an extraordinary man, what an extraordinary story. And his book, which I recommend and read to lead this week, is Not a Real Enemy. It's the story of his father, who was a Hungarian Jew who was sent to labor camps as a young kid, said goodbye to his parents, and endured labor camps, escaped from the Nazi labor camp, got picked up again, and then escaped the Nazis a second time through a lot of intrepid thinking and resourcefulness, as well as a lot of support from kind neighbors and strangers helping him survive that. Once the war was over, he was still alive. His parents were not. They perished in Auschwitz. Devastating story there. He went back to Hungary, into communist Hungary, which wasn't so great either. And so he endured that and lived through even more perilous times through that time, until he eventually made a break with his wife and left for America. It's quite a moving story about the power of courage. And we have the courage to stand up to tyranny? Do we have the courage to stand up to racism? Do we have to just endure it if we are the victims of it? As it asks big questions of us as humans, and can we do better? And I'm hoping that we can. And I'm ever so grateful to Rob for sharing his story with us. So without further ado, here is Rob. Well, all the way from Southern Florida, welcome to the show, Dr. Robert Wolfe.
Thank you, Zoe. I appreciate you having me. Much appreciated. Very grateful. And please call me Rob if you'd like.
I'd love to call you Rob. That's my
Don't
husband's name also.
Just don't call me late for dinner.
No, definitely not late for dinner. And this is particularly timely for a podcast. And this book that you've written, which is a testimony to your father's incredible life is really impressive, and I've been immersing myself in the book in lead up to talking with you. For those who haven't read it yet, can you tell us a little bit about your father's tremendous experience of escaping the Nazis during World War II?
Well, it's unbelievable, really. I'm going to go a little history of the book. My mom and dad wrote his autobiography in the 1970s. They went from paper and pencil to typewriter to computer to disc, and they wrote the stories as though they'd happened the previous day. And the book covers my dad's life. Of course, it's a biography by my dad, but it's also a history book of Hungary from World War I to the end of the Hungarian Revolution in 1956. Both my parents were frontliners in that last war. My dad was an OBGYN, doubled down as a trauma surgeon, and my mom was a medical student, and she ran the blood bank. So that's a little known war. That's 56. This is under the communists, and we can come back to that too. It's the trials and tribulations of my dad's family. My dad was a four-time escape artist, twice from forced labor camp. First time was in the middle of the mountains, in the thicket of Carpathian Mountains, not knowing where he was going, escaping with a friend. And I read my dad's story on the manuscript maybe 30 years ago and didn't think much of it at the time. I did remember that first escape, but I was busy with career and family. And so I never really thought twice about redoing the book, and I wasn't really a writer. So flash forward, my dad passes away in 1997, unfortunately. My mom in 2016, unfortunately. And when I was taking care of my mom's affairs, a historian friend of the family handed me the disc. So my dad's story is now on the disc as an autobiography. I took care of my mom's affairs for a year. I retired for a year, and now we're up to 2018. And a friend of mine, I'm a radiologist, recently retired, 35 years in, 44 years when you think of all the training in school. But a friend of mine from Michigan asked me to read some cases and help them out because they were short. So I went back to work, and I started reading x-rays and ultrasounds. And as a radiologist, we have two screens. The one on the left is the patient queue, and the one on the right are the images. So between cases, I loaded up my dad's autobiography on the left, and I dictated the biography on the right. And literally tried to have the fidelity, try to say exactly what he said, without some broken English. My parents were very intelligent, but, they had accents, and nobody's English is perfect. But it was a kind of a dull biography. It was dad did that. Dad was born A to B to C, and so we pitched, and I mean we queried agents and publishers, and with little success, and close to self-publishing. But then I met a beta reader. I threw it to a few beta readers, and one hooked me up with my co-author Janice Harper, and she did an amazing job with the book and turned it into something really special. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be talking about the book. It wouldn't have won the 4 awards it did. We talk about that later. Fantastic. So she, parallel stories, converging stories, letters to and from home, conversations, and it's just fantastic the way she took the facts and the biography and ran with it and made it into a terrific novel. Getting rave reviews. Back to your question. So my dad escaped 4 times, twice from forced labor camp. The first was in the middle of the Carpathian Mountains. Fantastic story. And then his second one, they got double crossed.
So he escaped, but I mean, the fact that he had to escape again means did they find them pretty quickly after they escaped from the Carpathian Mountains?
He got double crossed. He and his friend Frank, they were supposed to separate, and they ended up literally within a hand's reach of each other in the middle of the thicket for hours. Well, and a third guy followed them. I don't want to say too much, but the third guy got caught, but they didn't. And I can't imagine how frightened you feel the fear in the scene. I mean, you can see this as a movie scene. I mean, it's so terrifying. But no, they got out. But here's the thing: what are you escaping to? Like, where is? We talk about the light at the end of the tunnel, but what do you have no food. You don't have a job. You don't have a place to live. You don't know where you're going. So somehow they found out their way down to the train tracks and made it to Budapest. And at this point they were used to walking all the time. Forced laborers. They were beaten. They were shot at by and they were all unarmed because they were unsatisfactory. They were considered undependable, unworthy of being in the Hungarian military. So these were forced laborers, and that's what probably made them survive because they were useful, young men. Needless to say, so he and his friend Frank get back to Budapest, and they meet some good people and bad, and a lot of anti-Semitism in the background in the whole book. But a guy driving a truck picks them up and says, "I'll take you wherever you want to." Blah blah blah. And they end up taking him. He double crosses him and takes him to another, they called it the dog pound, where they kept the forced laborers that were caught. And so they were there for a little while, not too long, but it was in Budapest, across from Nazi headquarters. And they escaped from there. They split second timing. A pack of cigarettes actually saved their life, if you can believe it or not. The distraction of a pack of cigarettes and the luck of God. I mean, just the luck, and had to get on a streetcar between guards, and they made it and got away. And then for the rest of the war, they were hiding here and there, hat boxes, casinos, under demented ladies, a cot or bunk in assisted facility. I mean, the story, wearing dresses, all kinds of crazy stuff, and they made it. A lot of good people, and so the book has 20 miracles, and I count his 4 escapes. He had 2 from communist Hungary too, and the last one with my mom when they finally left after the Hungarian Revolution. But 20 miracles in this book, not besides the 4 escapes. How he found out what happened to his parents, who unfortunately perished at Auschwitz while he was away at the forced labor camp. My mom's and his dad was a dentist. My dad became a doctor, like I said, an OBGYN, and I'm a radiologist, so I'm third generation in, I guess. But yeah, obviously a dentist is a real threat to society. And my mom's grandfather, who was a rabbi, also perished at Auschwitz. So, real threats to society. So really sad stuff. There's no sugarcoating in this book. What happened in Auschwitz, so he meets a witness of what happened to his parents months after the war, and they just kind of recognized each other in his hometown. Unbelievable. The way my dad got into medical school finally, because they had a Jewish quota, that was a miracle. Arguing with armed Russian soldiers and winning that argument. I mean, that was during his 3rd escape. Changed his mind and he went back to school. He was a medical student at the time. Great story. And finally, their 4th was harrowing too. My mom, the muddy conditions, the Russian airplanes overhead with the lights on, and they're closing down the roads. They were blocking the roads with trees, whatever they could do. And the renegade, here's a spoiler. I call him a renegade, or what's the word? The crusader, I guess, who's helping them through the farms and the mud and the muck. And he couldn't have squeaky clothes. They had a crying baby their first night, so they couldn't. They had to turn around. My dad had his medical bag, but they couldn't sedate the kid, and so they had to cancel, or they separated and they didn't let them go. Come to find out later that they made it okay. But the renegade's spurting out anti-Semitic remarks while he's taking these people from point A to point B to just to get them to Austria. And he was a priest, is the guy who knew this guy. So really sad stuff. And then when they even got to Austria, the border guards, they bribed the border guards with some booze, a couple bottles of rum, if I remember correctly. And these guys got drunk and they started spewing out anti-Semitic remarks. At this point, my mom and his risk tolerance was way up there by then, but they were also smart enough to not talk and try to defend the Jewish people and try to say they just want to get the heck out of there. And unfortunately, under communist Hungary, just like Nazi Hungary, same thing. You have bugged phones, everybody watching every move, and the cloak and dagger stories, like we said, and people, my dad's colleagues in medicine, trying to get them to try to get them in trouble because they got points. They would get points with the communist governments, all of that stuff. So so many miracles, and I couldn't just let this book sit on my computer as a disc or on the screen. I really had to share it with the world because I couldn't believe it. And my parents wrote it as though they knew I would do this, which I always joke, don't you hate it when your parents are right? They sure were. And yeah, 6 years ago when I started this project, you never would have thought I would do this. And here we are. I mean, and it's a labor of love, but it is labor. And I'm going to continue to fight anti-Semitism while we share the stories.
So the story is remarkable, and all the pain that comes through it, and also the tales of miracles and kindness at the same time, is all in there. What struck you as poignant, as something significant for you? I mean, it's an incredible story, but what was it in there that really had the impetus for you to carry it forward into the world?
Well, the escapes were one thing. I mean, those are so exciting too. But things that I didn't know about my dad, he got beaten by his father when he was a kid, like for being late. They were very disciplined people, so that he never really talked about that. The way that my dad's parents died, the eyewitness that saw what happened, that I had to put the book down for a week when I read that and tried to redo it. I really had to. It really affected me. And then just the funny stories and things, the little things that my dad's integrity, my dad's determination, resilience, all of that. It just all poignant and just it was too well written. It was too true. And nobody knows about Hungary. That's the other thing. Like I didn't
Yeah.
know all this, and I learned a lot about the history and the Holocaust. And I was burnt out from it because my mom and dad were Holocaust educators. So
Mm.
I got the zap once I read the story again. I got the zap. Superman's kryptonite. I call it. It just sort of summoned me. Called out to me, and so I went with it. But yeah, it's a lot of stories. I can't point any single one, but so many. The poignant thing, like how about a barber cutting my dad's hair, and his hair is so long, it's obviously he's a prisoner on the run or whatever, and he's spewing out anti-Semitic remarks, and oh, I could kill a Jew if he was right here with me, and my dad was like, well, I'm one, and you don't know it, so, and he kept his mouth shut there too. So those little stories, they kind of add up, and so even when you were in a forced labor camp where they were beaten and urinated on, and I had to dig landmines and dig for landmines and place landmines and dig for runways and freezing cold and then doing worthless work that was meaningless just to make them work. So
Mm.
all that kind of thing. It makes you think. The poignant thing there too is that 80 years later, 100 years later, we're still going through the same thing. The
Mm.
only difference is people are finding different ways to persecute each other, to punish each other, torture, kill, maim, whatever you starve, imprison. However, we're doing now, it's tunnels. And of course, we got the Ukraine war, which I call the Hungarian Revolution on steroids because it's ongoing and it's a really horrible war. But in my book presentations, I talk about how the Russians just haven't changed much. So hopefully the war is coming to an end soon. I'm glad to see that it has in Israel. The stories are different, but the song remains the same. It's the same idea that racism and anti-Semitism are wrong, and it doesn't just affect the victims; it does their neighbors and governments and the economy, refugees, and death, of course. So all of it is combined in this book. That, yeah, like I said, I couldn't just leave it there. I had to put it out there.
It's heart-wrenching. And I'm wondering, having, really dug into it and swum in that river of anti-Semitism and racism and immersed yourself in your father's story and to see it around us all everywhere. Um, how do you maintain hope? Do you maintain hope?
Actually, that's a great question because I do get up some days and say, nobody gives a bleep about anti-Semitism, but that's few and far between. But I do get up sometimes and say, this is hard. I mean, it's out there, but for people that it doesn't affect, they're going to be indifferent. And I get that part. If you don't see, like, God forbid, we had Palestinian Hamas flags with trucks and jeeps and armed vehicles coming down the streets of Florida or Australia or whatever, then it would change how people think. But that's what they had back then. Occupied countries, out of the frying pan and into the fire. But the hope is there. I mean, this is why I'm doing it, is to try to fight anti-Semitism. And I do it in my own little corner. I'm not a professional historian, but I know quite a bit about the Hungarian history now in the 20th century and how sad it was for those people over all those years.
Mm.
Here's another point. If the United States if they had occupied and won in Hungary rather than the Soviets, then we wouldn't be having this conversation either. I wouldn't be an American. I probably would have been raised in Hungary. Maybe if I was lucky, go to medical school in Hungary, and things might have been a lot better there. The poor people now, Orban, people talk about him. I don't get into politics, but I've heard not such great things about him, and that he's Putin's puppet. And people wouldn't think twice of a land for people deal, which we mentioned in our book too. In 1939, I think it was, when they had a Polish refugee land for people deal, and it had ended badly for them. So my dad was super lucky. I just heard the statistic about 5% of forced laborers survived. Now, I don't know how to verify that, but he was one of 5%. Many had
Mm.
death marches.
Mm.
Part of the reason, I think, for their first escape was they were afraid that they might be on a death march. And where were they going to escape to? If they stayed in Hungary and they lost the war, they were screwed. If they went to Austria and they lost the war, even worse, because you've got the Nazis there. So
Mm.
it kind of worked out. But there's so many little twists and turns that it's unimaginable. And the luck on this guy, it's just unbelievable. Here's a spoiler. And I don't want to get off the subject, but he missed an escape. So he actually went to the wrong train station under communist Hungary, and everybody else who made the correct train got arrested. for trying to escape, and including my dad's medical school classmate. So the luck on this guy, right? I mean, the luck of the Irish, the luck of the Jewish. I
Yeah.
like to call it the hand of God. I mean, I don't know if you don't believe in God after reading this book, then something's wrong. The original title was going to be The Hungarian Papillon, the Hungarian butterfly, after the
Yeah.
famous escape artist from. But my co-author didn't like it so much because the younger reader wouldn't understand the referral.
Yeah.
The other title I had was The Sixth Book of Moses, because my dad's Hebrew name was Moshe ben Yosef. Yosef was Joseph, his dad, who perished, and because all the miracles, the story. So the Sixth Book of Moses would have been my another title. But I like Not a Real Enemy. It's a very appropriate title.
I
It's a
was going to
chapter.
ask you about that.
Oh,
It's a very
okay.
appropriate title.
It
What
sure
is the
is.
significance of calling it Not a Real Enemy? What is the message there?
Well, the theme resonates throughout as the story. As you know, he's always on the run. His life is unstable for years. It's just, and he's not a real enemy. He's just an innocent guy, but he's an enemy because he's Jewish. But the story was when he, now, like I said, I talk about his risk tolerance. The night before their last escape from the country, dad was already established as an OBGYN in the hospital, and he sneaks in to the medical records room in medical school between security guards to see what his dossier said, because he was worried if the Russians had caught them, that there'd be hell to pay, right?
Mhm.
So they called him, in their arrogance, not a real enemy. And I thought, well, that makes sense. But as my co-author pointed out to me, he was a real enemy, because he and my mom, good people, they would have been doctors all their lives in Mother Hungary, which they loved. Mother Hungary, yes. Nazi Hungary, no. Communist Hungary, no. So in the end, they were a real enemy because the country lost two people, not with swords and blades and knives and guns, fisticuffs. It was just brains, courage, and luck. And so they were a real enemy. And that, like I said, that the title resonates throughout the book. I mean, you can just, it makes sense.
Okay.
And we named that chapter Not a Real Enemy too. That was, great writing by my co-author, thinking of all that. So she's amazing.
How do you hope people are changed by reading this book?
Well, it changed me, and I thought, if this doesn't change people, um, there's something wrong. And I've had so much feedback over the last year or two from people who've said, "Boy, this," and Christians and Jews, and either and one of my best friends is Muslim, and he loved the book, and he wrote a great review. And no, it will change people. I mean, it'll make them think, "Oh, maybe this is wrong. Maybe all this hatred is wrong." And I don't think anybody agrees with what's going on in Gaza, or a lot of people don't agree with these protests in New York City and all over the world. But it gets worse when, now we're seeing synagogues attacked. People are, like, even in Australia,
Mm.
ironically, the Australian visitors, when my first trip to the Holocaust Museum in DC, I did too, a fantastic experience. They said anti-Semitism isn't a problem here. And I'm thinking, okay, that must be great. I'll move to Australia. Wonderful. And then next thing you hear, a year later,
Yeah.
there are attacks. So the Amsterdam attacks, an LA man, 65-year-old, killed, president of a temple in my hometown area in Detroit, Michigan, killed, all this stuff. So I'm not gonna be able to change the people that already hate, the Hamas, or whatever, that already hate. But what I'm trying to do is recruit people to understand what we're talking about, get me to do more podcasts and presentations like this, and ultimately teach in the classroom. I want the kids, hate is taught at home. I want the kids and the adults to learn about the dark world. And when you do, maybe you'll get more active. You'll
Mm.
you'll call your senator, your congressman, Justin Trudeau in the case of Canada. I'm not even sure who the president of Australia is, but
We have a
you
prime
got
minister.
prime minister. You're so far away from me that I can't even. You may as well be on the moon, as far as I'm concerned. It looks like a lovely country. I'd like to go, but I
Australia
get
is beautiful, and the stories about anti-Semitism, and also paralleling that, Islamophobia. So there's attacks on both Muslims and Jewish people happening at the moment, and it's sort of reflecting the struggles that are happening in the Middle East. And so those
it's so
stories,
sad. No,
because
no.
people have families there, so that conflict carries forward into Australia. Um, so that's
I'm
we're seeing that here too.
I'm not big into that. I mean, we can go back to 911. People are denying 9/11. These young kids that weren't even born yet for 9/11. That's hard to believe, because Americans died. It was an attack against Americans, and that was
Mm.
Christians, Jews, Muslims, Asians,
Mm.
uh, visitors, travelers. Never mind all the collateral damage, the cost that we're still feeling. and sickness. But that's denied. But Islamophobia by the sheep, by the unlearned, by the ignorant, was rampant against the Muslim people that had nothing to do with this attack.
Mm.
And then the same with the COVID. We had the coronavirus, and some of the Asians were being attacked, and now because of October 7th, the Jewish people. So it's all wrong, and it shouldn't happen. And I'm doing my best to, even my little corner of it is just to try to get people to change their mind, and it works in a lot of cases. People buy into it, and
Stories
I'm
are
not even selling.
powerful, and like you said, you've read that one story about how your grandparents were killed in was it Auschwitz? They
Yes,
died in Auschwitz.
grandparents I never met, 50 years old.
Yeah.
The only good news about that is Hitler died at 50. That's the only good. He didn't live any longer than he was a nightmare. And these leaders of Hamas, the leaders of Iran. Iran was really close to being run by younger people. They're more moderate, less hardliners, and I don't know what happened there. But it's just become, it's a horrific place. If it's, I'm sure most of the citizens there aren't like the leaders, let's say, but they have to keep their mouths shut, just like they did in Hungary, North Korea, China, the Soviet Union. You had to keep your mouth shut. And look what happened in Syria. Look what happened in Iraq. Once the bad leader is gone, people are like, oh, we can change things now. The Wicked Witch is dead. That kind of thing. I mean, so it's funny, the psychology, but we're lucky in America. I assume you're lucky in Australia, but hearing taxes on people for their religion. Here's another disappointing thing: when LGBTQ or these professional athletes and actors that are African American start spouting out anti-Semitic remarks, that really bothers me, because if you know anything about history with the Nazis and the Aryans, the white supremacy, you guys were next. LGBTQ, Black people, Muslims, anybody who wasn't Aryan, anyone who didn't fit in. And God willing, thank God they didn't win in North America. It was, most of that war was confined to Europe and Eurasia, but unfortunately the Pacific too. That World War II, awful war. I mean, 50 million people died in that war. We always talk about the 6 million Jews, but 50 million people died in world. If you think about the world's population back then, that's quite a percentage. That's quite a lot of people.
Massive. So coming back to an individual, whether they read your book or not, how can we, as individuals, stop anti-Semitism, promote acceptance, whether it's anti-Semitism or Islamophobia or hate of any sort? How do you advocate for a world absent of those things?
Well, like I said, teaching in the classroom is a good start. Seeing your local politicians and telling them, especially if you witness something that's a hate crime or something like that, have them on your side. There's so many ways to do it. Like I said, if you're a writer like me and you're doing the subject, you should be doing what I'm doing as well, which is podcasting and talking to audiences that will listen, and even audiences that won't listen. But I get a lot of audiences that people don't buy the book, but I think that they think about, well, I want to talk to the kids. I had a great lecture today. You don't have to hate your kid, and hopefully, or not hate your kid, but you teach your kid not to hate. It's something that people that can do when they come to my lectures. So it's a combination of things. It doesn't always work, but I mean, that's the best I can do. And not everybody's going to read the book. Maybe a movie someday. A lot of people say it could be. That would be a moving. If the movie were done right, it would circulate people back to the book. But a movie is very powerful. We talk about Schindler's List and the Anne Frank story and Life is Beautiful. And there's this new one out that I still want to see about a Hungarian refugee, The Brutalist. Those kind of things have a really powerful message. And if this book ever became a docudrama or a series or a movie, I think it would really move people. Fingers crossed on that. We'll see. But
that's exciting if that can be made into it. The book has had 4 awards. Can you tell me about the awards, and then where can people get a copy of the book?
I appreciate you saying that. And may I show the book?
You may certainly show the book.
Right, the reflection of the light might, but it's not a real enemy. And
look at all those seals. That's exciting.
It's unbelievable. I know, and congratulations for you. I see you've won awards on several of your books, and Mazel Tov, congratulations for that. But Not a Real Enemy, the true story of a Hungarian Jewish man's fight for freedom. If you Google Not a Real Enemy, or if you Google my name, Robert J. Wolf, MD, you're sure to find it. I have a YouTube channel. I have a website, robertjwolfmd.com. It's got tons of content, not only World War II and the Holocaust, but also the Hungarian Revolution and communist Hungary. Still doing videos like that, adding that to that in the YouTube channel. I'm on social media across the board. I'm on X, they call it now, instead of Twitter, Meta, Facebook. I've got a Facebook author page, Not a Real Enemy by Robert Wolf. You'll find me there. Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, which is my favorite social media. I get more connections and important networking through LinkedIn than elsewhere, but they all contribute. And recently I'm on Blue Sky and TikTok. One of the podcasters suggested try Blue Sky. A lot more Jewish people. I don't know if that makes a difference, but I'm slowly connecting there. And then TikTok. I mean, I never thought of TikTok as being a way to promote books, but some people do it. And some of these, my fellow Amsterdam publishers, authors, they do well on TikTok or on Instagram. So I don't know. You can't be on all of them at once. You have to kind
Oh
of
my
prioritize.
goodness. It's so
But you can find
exhausting.
me on all that. If you do Google Not a Real Enemy or Robert J. Wolf, Robert J. Wolf, MD, you'd be sure to find me. And feedback welcome. Please, if you like the book and you think it's amazing, please do a review. Invite me for another podcast. I'll do live interviews. I haven't said no to anything, so I'll do live interviews, live events, book presentations, and remote on Zoom. I've got JCC Ottawa coming up, and that's a Zoom. And I'm going to the Long Island Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center in a couple of weeks to do a live presentation there. I already mentioned the mothership, the Holocaust Museum in DC. I've done the Illinois Holocaust Museum, which was a fantastic experience, a really, really well done program. And we closed the place. And I'm going to do more of those, and I'm going to keep doing it until more people say, hey, this guy's got something to him. Or, hey, I know you from your book. At the Holocaust Museum in DC, it was cool. This guy knew me from LinkedIn. Just a kid I didn't know, and he knew me from LinkedIn. So I thought that was how many times
That's
you get to hear
awesome.
that. So you never know. But easy to find, hard to read sometimes. People can't put it down, they say, but
Mm,
the sad stories sometimes a little hard to get through
yeah.
without choking you up, and that's what the book is meant to do. That's what we're doing. It has a lot of humor in it too, and of course, happy ending. Dad delivered 10,000 babies in the Detroit area after
Oh
everything
my
he went through,
God.
which we call redemption. Doesn't bring back his family or all the dead people, but it sure brought a lot of life back into the world. And their demeanor, this is the most inspiring thing. Their demeanor, you would never know everything that they went through. They were jovial and jolly, intelligent, like to share. They well-rounded, travel, education, museums, arts, on and on and on. You would never know what they went through. So, and they deserved it. If anybody deserved a good second half of their lives, it was my mom and dad for sure. So, very inspiring.
Thank you, Rob. Now, are you ready for the fast three?
Okay, I don't know if I can do the fast three, but okay, I'll do my best.
See how we go. All right, number one, what is the future technology you most want right now?
I thought that would have been a hard question, but it occurred to me, AI, artificial intelligence. It needs to be better. It needs to be better now. I'm a retired radiologist now, but voice to text is important. I can save time, but it's really not that great, and I have to edit more for that. So I could use an assistant to help me because I'm 50 phone calls deep. Who knows how many queries? And I could use an assistant, especially tech savvy. So those would be my two first answers. And then, of course, if I knew more about technology, maybe things would be a little easier for me too. But I learn as I go. I think I'm doing a pretty good job with it, and my book marketing it's good, I guess. I mean, it's good marketing and sales don't necessarily coincide, but you have to. Everyone says I'm doing the right thing, so I'm going to continue doing that. So yeah, and that's all technology. The whole thing, everything is technology now. So AI would be the single answer though.
Okay, awesome. What's the best tip you ever got for leadership?
I got 50 of them, maybe 100, but I'm going to give. When I was a first year resident in radiology, I remember my first week, I was reading chest x-rays with one of the attendings, and he said, you can learn something from every attending. And I expounded, I said, you can learn something from every case. And realizing, a case is not a good word because it's a person that we're x-raying. So it's actually a person. We're just looking at an image of them or part of their body. But you can learn something from every case, and you can learn something from every experience or every person you meet. And leadership is from within. Lead by example. I was captain of the swim team. I was vice president of my fraternity. I ran an MRI center for a while. You don't get that just from hanging around and just doing your job. And so leadership is earned. Trust is a part of it. Integrity is a part of it. You need to get along with people. You need to be a team player. So all of those things combined to be leader. It's not about the money, which my dad always said with his Hungarian accent about medicine. Don't do it for the money. And he's right. I think money is a corrupter. And I think money is a part of the problem with our terrorists and other areas that we get these rebellions. So leadership's important, and hopefully in our country now we've got good leadership. But it also, CEOs of hospitals and companies. It's managers. I see people treated so badly sometimes that why do you have to make people suffer? It's another way to suffer. So leadership is from within and lead by example.
Okay. Number 3, what are you reading or listening to right now?
Well, I'm actually rereading my book because you need to reread your books once in a while if you're going to talk about it, especially the history. You remember the stories. So, and it's on audiobook now too, by the way. So I'm listening to the audiobook with a friend and rereading it. So that's my book. But I'm also reading a few others, and I'm the type of, I start going and I procrastinate. On Sunny Days We Sang, another interesting book from a fellow Amsterdam published author. She's also an author here in Southern Florida. Reflections. It's a Auschwitz survival story. The lady Agi Rubin passed away a few years ago, and her husband Zoltan passed away recently too at 102. God bless him. Good book. It's a short memoir. I just got this Dad's Jokes Haggadah by Martin Bodick. He's from the New York area.
Dad's jokes.
Writer. Yeah, it's the Dad Jokes Haggadah. I can't wait to start that one, but it's next up on the queue. I've got A Brave Face. It's another Amsterdam published author, Carolyn Crocker. That's in my car, so I don't have the copy. I just got this Choosing Sides, which looks like an interesting story. And last but not least, and I would recommend this one too, The Long Walk. Similar, same idea where these poor guys, he wasn't even Jewish, but he was part of the army, and so ended up in these concentration camps or whatever you want to call them. And the trek was remarkably horrific. So my dad had to walk around the whole northern side of Hungary, but his suffering was different too, beatings and mental torture. And this guy got all of it too, torture, physical, mental, and just brutal stories, but all good books. And there's another 20 or 30 piled up.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
So it's very hard, and working with the book and so, but slowly but surely, I enjoy reading, I enjoy writing. And another great thing, meeting people like you. That's another great thing about this journey, is just meeting a lot of super people that care. I could swear, and there's people that give a beep, somebody that cares.
Yeah.
And that's what counts.
Well, thank you, Rob. That was the fast 3.
I love the cynicism, but you're right. I'm a radiologist. I talk for a living, so that's what we do. The faster you talk, the sooner you get done with your day. It's that simple. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Rob. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I'm really enjoying the book. I will get a review posted when I'm done. And thank you for your commitment to getting the story out there and for raising our awareness that we could be better as humans, that we could be kinder, we could be more accepting. And I really appreciate you and all the effort you're doing to put this message out into the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Couldn't say it better myself. God bless you.
Read to Lead. And I'm very thrilled to be recommending this book by my guest today, Dr. Robert Wolfe. And it is Not a Real Enemy: The True Story of a Hungarian Jewish Man's Fight for Freedom. And like I said earlier in the show, it is quite remarkable and very moving to read the story of a brave kid, Bailey, a brave young man, escaping the Nazis, risking his life, risking the life of people who supported him to escape certain death, near death, horrible torture, you name it, at a time of history which was pretty horrible. And hopefully we don't see the repeat of it in our lifetime, though sad to say, it is probably being repeated around the world in different little pockets of conflict. So I think this book is so important because it shows us the power of courage and the power of compassion. And those two things together can help us confront and deal with tyranny, can help us survive tyrants like Stalin, like Hitler, and prevent the rise of them into the future. So Not a Real Enemy is your highly recommended read for this week. That's it for the show today. I hope you found it as intriguing and as moving as I did, listening to Robert's story, his dad's story, and what that was like, and the grandparents he never got to meet because they died in Auschwitz. That's an incredible legacy to bear and an incredible tribute to his dad to be able to offer this to the world. So let's keep doing the right thing and sharing these stories to help us understand each other better. If you like the episode, please rate and review the show on any of the podcast platforms, drop a comment in any of the social media platforms, or on my Substack where this will be posted so that you can engage in conversation with me and other readers/listeners. Become a podcast insider where you get your own dedicated email, which comes with checklists, discussion questions, insider secrets from what's happening behind the scenes that I don't air publicly on the show. So it's your way of getting more juice and more traction from the show so you can take advantage of all the content and put it into practice. And you can do that at zoerouth.com, click on podcast and sign up there. Next week, you know what? It's the 400th episode of the show. 400 episodes. So in preparing for that, I looked at, when did I start podcasting? I always thought it was about 6 years ago. Turns out it was in 2016. I'm like, oh my goodness, I've been doing this for 9 years. Wow, it's much longer than I thought. And 400 episodes is kind of mind-boggling to get my head around all that content, all those conversations. So next week, I go through some highlights, some of the things I've learned from the guests along the way, and some episodes I think that are worth revisiting. And all that will be up next week. In the meantime, live with grace, lead in service, live well, lead well.